Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm taking a look at the book Linked by, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Albert Laszlo Barabasi. And the little blurb on the front says how everything is connected to everything else and what it means for business, science, and everyday life. Link could alter the way we think about all of the networks that affect our lives. And what do they mean by networks? Well, if you're watching me give this video, you are benefiting from a network, the internet itself. But the book starts out with essentially the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. The idea that any actor, 6 degrees really, can be linked to Kevin Bacon in 6 degrees. And the reality is it works for any actor. Pretty much any actor in Hollywood can be linked to any other actor within 6 degrees. Some can be linked to him in only 3. And they did research in this and discovered that essentially for any 2 humans on this planet, any 2 humans, they can be linked in 19 links. So 19 degrees of separation between anyone, because that's the nature of our species. That's the nature of how the world works, of how people connect, because we are a communal species. But networks, again, they also discuss the idea of how the internet is connected. And the author was key in trying to understand and help create a map of the internet, because a map of the internet didn't always exist. The internet came into being, and no one really stopped to say, okay, we're gonna write all this down as we go, and we're gonna see how every single thing is connected to every single other thing as we go, which would have been maybe good, rather prescient, but also incredibly tedious. So people looked into it. Now, at first people were like, well, they're just randomly connected. And the idea being, say if there's 100 different websites, and that if you wanted to look for something, you would ask your search engine, and your search engine would then go out and check every single one. Because it would have to, because it would be at random. But no, that's not what happens. It would make search engines meaningless. I mean, you go search for something right now. It'll search for you, and in a fraction of a second you'll find something. So you can't have that result if we're trying to find everything with a truly randomly selected network. What they came to discover, and this is not going to shock anybody, is that there are hubs, that there are places that are where lots of smaller networks connect, and then those ones have even smaller networks connect. It was called the power curve, I believe, how we refer to it, is that when you'll have a whole lot of small networks, and as the size of the connection, the size of the hubs gets larger, the numbers decrease till eventually you get down to, like, for example, airports. There's like 5 or 6 really key airports in the United States, and then there are many the ones that are like half that size, and there are many more that even are quarter that size, and then you get down to the little tiny regional ones, that've got, barely have a paved runway. There are lots of those. But they all connect to each other, and most of them go into those hubs because that's the best way for the system to function. Not all of them do. There will be connections to each other along the way. But because of those hubs, our internet connections, it's hard to take the entire internet down. You have to go after those really important hubs. And people have tried it, and they've succeeded in taking down sections of the internet, because unfortunately, if you are succeeding taking out a hub, all of that load has to go somewhere. So now you start to overwhelm other networks. But because of the degree of interconnectivity, you can't instantaneously overwhelm. You can't intentionally aim that load at a single spot. It's being diffused across many different connections. If you could take one hub out and then aim all of that overload to another one, then you could probably take that out. But I don't think anybody's figured out how to do that particular thing yet, and I'm hoping they never do. And reading this book, it's fascinating, and thankfully the author does not throw a lot of math at you. All of the math is present, like the little notes and stuff it tells you. So if you want to look at the math, and the formulas for all the stuff is right there. So if that is your thing, the book does present it to you. But the rest is spoken in more of a colloquial manner at the layperson. And as it's going, and we get to the end of the book, I came to realize that what he had been describing is something that I think I had intuitively just kind of assumed how things always were. I'm not necessarily sure why I had that assumption, but there was a point in the book and I'm like, well, duh. But I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't show you the math, so I'm really happy these folks did. But it really felt like, yes, that's how the world works. That's how connections work. That's how personal connections and computer connections and how any of this stuff functions. It's how advertising, and marketing functions. That's why you'll have like some marketing campaigns that only work in very small zones that don't appeal to the whole nation or the whole planet, but they're still successful, but they're connecting to other places. And if you'd like to find those, you can because those other connections exist. And it also talked about showing how networks are formed. And it, to me, was kind of a reinforcement of the idea that hierarchies are an inherent component of networks. That hierarchies will arise out of a network. As networks are formed, hierarchies will appear. That you cannot get away from that. You are never going to escape hierarchies. Now, I know that politically and maybe even financially, that bothers a lot of people. I know that there are a lot of folks in the world that think of the word hierarchy as a swear word, and I don't. For me, a hierarchy is nothing but a tool. It is a lever. It multiplies power. It multiplies the power of people to accomplish goals. Can hierarchies be used for evil? Yes. Any tool can. But we wouldn't have many of the things in the world that we now depend upon without hierarchies. You simply could not arrive at those creations, the internet, Hoover Dam, an interconnect, a national highway system, without hierarchies. You're just not going to get there. No matter how much individuals may think that's a really good idea, unless there's a hierarchy involved to achieve it, it's never going to happen. So this book, in many ways, really helped me grasp that hierarchies really do arise out of the very nature of what networks are. So really enjoyed myself with that. It also reminded me of Stephen Gould's concept of the idea of the punctuated equilibrium. I always have a hard time saying that. The idea that evolution does not do this. Evolution goes. It does advance, but then it plateaus. And it plateaus because there's no further evolutionary pressure on that ecosystem, on those organisms. And then when there is an ice age, continents separate or continents come together, those then create evolutionary pressure, and then evolution has to respond. Because if it doesn't, a lot of things are going to die out. Some will, but some will succeed, advancing that particular animal or plant into a new direction. Evolution. And when I read that, I'm like, yes, that's how things work. Unless you have to do something, you don't. So again, it was one of those, well, duh. I'm glad you did the research, Steve, but I enjoyed reading it, but I was just like, this something that I have a hard time imagining that everyone didn't get. Kind of like plate tectonics. How could you ever look at a map of the world, a globe, and see all those shapes that fit together perfectly and not think that at one time they fit together perfectly? It's great that we know why. Awesome. But there's just no way to look at that and go, yeah, they fit together. We just need to figure out how. The fact that there were so many people that said, no, it's a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. Really. Unless you can prove to me it's a coincidence, I don't think it's a coincidence. And they did the research and we found out it's not a coincidence. So I really liked Link. It was a good book. It is not, again, the science isn't horrible. As far as like having to deal with really complex mathematical concepts, again, the formula are present for those that like the maths. But for the rest of us, you can read the book without worrying about it. Now, the one thing it did bug me, and this is something I have a problem with many books, it is not this book in specific, is that they put the notes at the back. Don't put your notes at the back of a book. Because if a single chapter has 30 references, 30 footnotes that are important to the adding to the text, I am not going to read them if they're at the back of the book. You might as well not have included them. If you put them on the page, so I can just go and then see them, I will absorb all of it as I move through the book. I wish more editors would do that. I can understand that it messes up with the layout and you've got different font sizes on a page. I get that. But I think that for comprehension, it's a far superior model than putting all the extra information at the back of the book. But maybe that's just me. I should do a video on that. All right, so I suggest Linked. I had a good time. Give it a read.